verdict is in. At the moment, your two simian friends and sponsors are free on bail, but they'll soon be brought to trial for heresy.
What about me?
Oh, your case was preordained. In a way, you did the state a service, because you made it possible for us to expose Zera and Cornelius. Now the tribunal has placed you in my custody for final disposition. You realize what that means?
No.
Emasculation to begin with. Then experimental surgery on the speech centers, on the brain. Eventually a kind of living death.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello, and welcome to episode 194 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? Or should that be episode 201? Anyway, I'm Becca, and as always joined by my fellow co-hosts Chris Byrne and Dave Bond. And tonight, as we begin a new series, we also welcome our special guest, Charlie Brigden, movie director and films on wax. How are you both?
Both of the three of us, yes.
All the three of us.
Good
And for myself, I'm fine. How are you guys?
I'm just reminiscing of the days where you'd actually, saw astronauts smoking on board spacecrafts. Just thinking, I can't see that happening in 100 years' time or so.
What type of world do we live in when you can't chain smoke in 0G?
I know, right?
I know. It's health and safety gone mad in my view.
I mean, Christ, all you have to do is open a window. That's fine.
Open a window in space.
Just crack it open.
Talk about ventilation. That'll get rid of it.
Space about to explode. You're like totally worth it.
When you're inside instead on the outside, you've got problems.
I was watching an episode of Only Fools and Horses a while back, and like Rodney is smoking in a hospital at one point. And this is the early 90s. It's like this all crept up on us like faster than we think.
Well, it did, didn't it? Literally.
Well, I think that's all very relevant conversation to tonight, sir.
But it's like when you go on airplanes and they still have like the ashtrays and and you think, Jesus, how old is this plane?
Mind you, planes are like 30 odd years old after time, aren't they? Get on.
Oh, so that's true. Yeah, they're going to be quite old, aren't they? I mean, I remember when did I go to the Hovercraft Museum? And obviously they had like vintage hovercraft from the 70s or something, and it was very weird to see, ashtray sort of bits in the armrest and everything else. You'd still get that maybe on planes at the moment because they are sort of really old stuff.
I didn't think the Hovercraft Museum would come up tonight.
No, that's really random.
Fair enough.
No, when you just mentioned that, I kind of thought, that's what it reminds me of. A complete unrelated mode of transport.
All right.
Nothing whatsoever to do with this film.
So this series, before we sort of get into it, we were supposed to do this in 2018, and we ran out of time with gaps and everything else, and Marvel and God knows what else. We ran out of time. We wanted to do it in 2018 to hit the 50th anniversary of the first film, and when we missed it, suddenly it wasn't a massive priority, so we got a few other things out of the way first. But yeah, we probably should have been doing this around the time we did Marvel, but Marvel took us nearly a year because of gaps, delays, and everything else. And that's that. So what are we covering over the next few weeks, Becca?
So over the next few weeks, we'll be working our way through the Planet of the Apes series, starting with the original and iconic Planet of the Apes, starring Charlton Heston, Roddy McDowall, Jeff Burton, Robert Gunnar, Kim Hunter, Maurice Evans, Linda Harrison, and Norman Burton, aka Felix, from Diamonds Are Forever, with a score by Jerry Goldsmith, script by Michael Wilson, no, not that one, Rod Serling, and based on the novel by Pierre Boulle, and directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, whose name I can't pronounce, and released in 1968.
Yeah, fairly early in 1968. So yeah, I'm now getting to sort of close to the age Charlton Heston was when he was making this. People age in very different ways these days. Charlie, you got quite a background with this series because you were always sort of going to join us for this. So what's your sort of background with Planet of the Apes?
I don't know really. I've just kind of always loved it since I saw it as kind of a kid.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I think they showed them all on BBC Two or something like that.
Right.
Had like a season, and they've just always been really, really impressive films and just really different.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like it, to be fair. So, just to quickly run us through what we're going to be covering, you have tonight 1968's Planet of the Apes. Next week will be Beneath the Planet of the Apes, starring continuity Charlton Heston as well as Charlton Heston.
Contractually obliged Charlton Heston.
Yeah, the 1970s sequel to it, which is in a similar style to this one. Then you have 1971's Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which, without ruining anything, is where the series absolutely massively changes direction. And is probably a favourite of mine, along with the fourth one, which is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes for 1972, followed by the one I remember loathing, but we'll see, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, 1973, and the last of the original series. We've then got the Tim Burton remake, Planet of the Apes from 2001, starring Marky Mark.
That'll be the highlight, I think.
Confusing the young man in me, only because Helena Bonham Carter looked way sexier in the ape makeup.
It's quite convincing.
Then we have the reboot series from the last decade. We have 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and then the Matt Reeves double, 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes, where I'm sure Charlie and I will both be waxing lyrical about the score to that film. I obviously, Charlie, dig in with score whenever you want. This has a Jerry Goldsmith score. Apart from that, I don't know a massive amount about the film, except that the screenplay is written by Michael Wilson, not that one, and Rod Serling, who's probably best known for the Twilight Zone.
So I've heard that name before.
Yeah. Now, Schaffner, the director of this film, I don't know him from very much. I'm going through, but he's probably best known outside of this for Papillon.
Yeah, well, The Boys from Brazil as well as another one.
Brazil, that's it.
Yeah, Boys from Brazil, not Brazil. That was terrible.
No, I'll just catch the end of it.
Sorry?
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say he did Patton as well.
I was just about to say Patton because that was the first Academy Award won by Francis Ford Coppola as well, who wrote the script for it. George C. Scott film from 1970. So actually, as you go through, there'll be a few things. I think I've seen Nicholas and Alexandria as well, but there are...
recommend that film, that's really good.
But when I glance through it quickly, you go, oh, Papillon, yeah. So that's really all I know about it. In terms of it's a fairly low-budget film, 5.8 million. But then having said that, nearly a decade later, Star Wars got knocked out for around that, so it's not unprecedentedly low. And it took a box office in North America, don't know the worldwide figure, of a shade over 33. So a solid hit in an era where it was always considered sci-fi films did not take big money. They had to be low budget for that very reason.
It's funny you mentioned Star Wars, because really Planet of the Apes was kind of the precursor of Star Wars in terms of the merchandising. Because everyone kind of goes mad about Star Wars and saying about how George Lucas obviously made the money from agreeing to have the rights to the merchandising and that kind of thing in his contract. But when Planet of the Apes and then the sequels came out, you had toys, you had lunchboxes, you had all sorts of things, and also you had this. You didn't only have the series; you had a TV series as well, and there was a cartoon as well, a Planet of the Apes.
I've not seen either.
Yeah, they weren't too bad, and so it was kind of like, yeah, it was really kind of like the first kind of franchise. To be honest with you, I mean,
they knocked them out fast as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when you were running back all those and thinking, like, maybe in 71, 72, 73, 74, how quickly they were knocking them out. I mean, you can tell with some of them, like you said, Battle for the Apes it's no spoiler to say that that's a bit of a disappointing finale to the series, but I mean, it's an important film because, I mean, the time that the film came out, I mean, it came out the same year as 2001. So, and you had a couple of years ago, in 66, you had Fantastic Voyage. So kind of around the time you had a real kind of little movement of really good kind of cerebral science fiction. I mean, you mentioned Rod Serling as well in the Twilight Zone, which of course with the Twilight Zone, and you had the Outer Limits on TV as well, which kind of added to that as well. So, and Star Trek as well.
Oh, definitely.
Because this was So this came out while Star Trek was still on air.
I think just a slight tangent to Star Trek is I was thinking about this when I was watching the film the other day. Some younger viewers will, and I don't want to generalize too greatly, but they might struggle because you've got this makeup that's very dated now and a lack of articulation in the faces and so on. It's a little like watching The Devil in the Dark. In that if you can switch off what you're watching in terms of the fact that this rock monster is actually just a carpet or a duvet cover or something, if you can switch that off and just focus on what the show is doing, it's really good. And Planet of the Apes is the same. You have to get past a certain stylistic datedness, and also I think Charlton Heston, we'll get into it through the film, but I think Charlton Heston, I'll come right out and say it, I don't think he was a particularly good actor. In recent weeks for different things, I've watched older films with people like Burt Lancaster in them. And quite a lot of these guys, there's only a handful of them that are really great, like a Robert Mitchum or something like that. But there's quite a few of the names from the era, even a Kirk Douglas, where you watch them and you think they still play all right now. Charlton Heston plays hammy as fuck. And he's a little bit out of his era, just as sort of cinema's going a bit sort of, there's new wave movements across the world, and Easy Rider comes out around this time, and cinema is going a little bit more counterculture. You've got quite an establishment figure in Charlton Heston, a little bit out of his time by this point. He's slightly odd casting in its way.
I think also it's like, I don't think he's in the right genre as well.
He's not as progressive, I would say.
He's definitely not progressive.
No, quite firmly.
I haven't seen many of Charlton Heston's movies, but I think he's more prominently known for things like Ben-Hur, those biblical types. He played Moses, and I think he's probably better suited that, because I kind of thought the same, Dave. I was like thinking he just feels a bit out of place. He doesn't scream like sci-fi. I'm an astronaut. I know. I was thinking maybe possibly because he's a name. That's probably what they could get at the time. I don't know, but I don't know. They're just
He's got quite a masculine presence as well. Obviously, as a male character, but it's very much kind of like typical American masculinity as well, definitely. But yeah.
I mean, I will just make a general point about the series. I don't know them as well as Charlie, because I think apart from this being my second viewing of Planet of the Apes for this show, I'd only seen the original 5 once each. So, but when they get to 3, they go a little bit more comedic in their way, although they're not comedies. I don't want to give that impression. But the decision they make in the 3rd film seems to be a budgetary one. When I look at the budgets, they drop accordingly. We're looking at a shade under 6 million here. By film 3, we're around the 2 mark. And the last couple are doing costing 1.7 million each. So you've got a budget being sort of cut to less than a third, more like 28-30% of the first film, and the box office adjusted accordingly was dropping. So it was diminishing returns. Whether the films mimic that, I don't know. But this is the only one they sort of threw relatively money at. Having said that, Chris mentions Ben-Hur, and I know Ben-Hur cost 13 million to make a long time before this film. What about you guys, Chris, Becca? You seen these films before?
I've seen this once. I haven't seen. I'm a completely relatively newcomer to Planet of the Apes. I've not seen any of the other originals. I think I've seen this once before, and I've seen the remake on initial release. Haven't seen it since, and the only ones I've actually come back and watched are the reboot, or I don't know if you want to call them reboots. I don't know, but the newer ones, which I think are really good. Spoiler alert, but so I'm relatively newcomer. I think my first intro to Planet of the Apes was actually the TV show. Randomly, it used to be on Channel 4, like sort of late Sunday mornings at one time. So I think I've caught like maybe a few episodes when it was on there, but I've never really sort of been been a franchise that I've gone to, so I'm very new to this really. So it's not really my I was going to say my bag, but it's not really my sort of wheelhouse really. It's not my it's not something I'm used to. So I'm coming into as a complete newbie pretty much.
I'm looking at the TV show overview on Wikipedia at the moment, and it does appear to be in a different continuity. Although Roddy McDowall is in it, so is Mark Bernard, as it happens.
Yeah.
Lalo Schifrin, composer for it, Mission Impossible theme.
Yeah.
There's a thread running through it.
Didn't run for that long. Only ran for 3 or 4 months. But looking at it, when it's giving an overview of the series, and it appears like a redo.
Yeah, very much so.
So I'd be kind of interested in that. I can't imagine it would look that much cheaper either, because I'd imagine they'd repurposed a lot of the outfits and makeup and stuff. So yeah, Roddy McDowall will be a thing through all the first few films of this series, but we'll come to all of that.
You mentioned about the films going more comedic with number 3.
Yeah.
Which maybe was a necessary turn after number 2.
Yeah.
But I mean, have you ever read the original novel?
No, I haven't. It's based on a French book, isn't it?
Yeah, it was called Monkey Planet, and Planet of the Apes in some places as well, by Pierre Boulle, who wrote The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Right.
And it's a satire.
Okay.
Yes, I read it when I was a child, which probably drew me to the film. And also because now I'm thinking a bit more, I was obsessed with apes and primates and monkeys because of King Kong.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We ought to do those sometime, haven't we?
Yeah. So I
I'll see the King Kong movies, definitely.
Yeah.
Mighty Joe Young and all those kind of things. And
might leave off Mighty Joe Young, but yeah.
Oh, the original Mighty Joe Young.
Oh, right.
I think I probably would drag my dad to see that at the cinema.
Yeah.
And so I was obsessed with apes, and I remember having a book when I was a kid that was all about apes in films, which was really good. And but it was a satire. So in the original book, and I think they did kind of do pre-production stuff for when they were doing the original film. It's quite modern, so you've got apes in helicopters and driving cars and as policemen and things like that.
So pretty much like Tim Burton did at the end of his film.
Exactly. Yeah.
It sounds like the Tim Burton movie.
Yeah. That was never explained because there wasn't a sequel. I think he knew what that meant, but of course it never got explored. But we'll get there in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that one.
Which is why some people think that the third film, particularly, is somewhat more faithful to the original novel because it has a much more obvious level of satire than in the original film.
Yeah, I mean, there's even some of the stuff you get. I mean, if you think about the decade that followed and the years that followed thereafter, where there's a frequent theme in films of press interest within the story and public interest in characters within a story being unable to distinguish between fame and infamy.
Yes.
Think of Network, where like he goes absolutely
mad as hell, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, he goes mad on fucking. He becomes a big celebrity just because, and he's just the guy needs help.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a little bit of that from the third film onwards. They become a little bit more sort of curiosities. I think we're going to be unable to hide the twist until the third film. But the third film goes to like more or less present day.
There's another twist.
I say more or less because if the third film is 1970, it's set in 73 or something like that. But it's pretty much present day, and it is to do with it directly links to these films. To this film, it's not a reimagining or anything. It's kind of a sequel and prequel all into one. And we see Charlton Heston's character Taylor again next week, but he's a minor character. From memory, I quite liked this one. That's not from memory. I've watched it this week, but my memory before we came into the series, I remember really not liking Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I'm not looking forward to the second one. I remember loving the third and fourth ones, and then really struggling with the fifth of the original five. So we'll see how that gets sort of challenged now. They are patchy in quality, but they're worth a look. They really are. I can't promise anyone listening who hasn't seen them that you will like them, but I don't think you'll regret giving them a try.
I'm very keen to see them.
And they do have Ricardo Montalban as well.
Well, that's what I kind of thought. There may be, obviously with the Jerry Goldsmith music, there might be a slight Star Trek crossover, but I think that's all it's going to be.
Yeah, nobody says nice feature or anything.
No. But I think Montalban will definitely be the highlight from what I gather reading around these films.
As I say, the third and fourth ones are really good for me. As for this film, I don't know what I can add in terms of like creative crew. Jerry Goldsmith's score, I don't know how I didn't know that. It's very simple, isn't it? It's a very simple score.
Yeah, but very experimental.
It doesn't sound very him. If there is a him, he's a lot more malleable than some.
Yeah, it does if you know him.
Right.
Maybe, but I mean, yeah, because I mean, at this point, I don't know if it was Schaffner, the director. He and Goldsmith had a kind of partnership, and they ended up working on several. Because they worked together on Pattern, Papillon, The Boys from Brazil. I think they did maybe one of Schaffner's first. Yeah, he did a film called The Stripper, and Goldsmith scored that as well. And
if I put that film on now and someone's just taking wallpaper off the fucking wall, I'll be really disappointed.
And also there was
It's very steamy, Dave.
Whoa.
A film called Islands in the Stream, which was an Ernest Hemingway adaptation.
Yeah.
So they had a very good and fruitful partnership together. And yeah, for this, just because of the absolute weirdness of the film, it kind of feels even weirder that the score is so kind of avant-garde. And I mean, it's been a famous thing for years that he uses actual mixing bowls from his kitchen in the score to get a certain kind of tone.
It's probably another thing that makes Charlton Heston feel out of place. This experimental, like the dawn of the 70s.
Yeah.
The only other creative I wanted to mention, just from looking around the other day, was Leon Shamroy. Leon Shamroy was the cinematographer on this, and he actually won 4 Academy Awards for his DP work. And nominated for a number as well, and he's a very old-fashioned cinematographer when you note the films he made, stuff like The King and I, South Pacific, and so on. But he also lensed Cleopatra, which is infamous in its way, the Elizabeth Taylor film, but it is beautiful. His career was pretty much done not that long after this. I think, in fact, it looks like this might even have been his last film in his late 60s. But I just wanted to mention him. He won 4 Academy Awards. So this is not skimping. They've got a name-leading man, probably past the absolute peak of his fame, but put a lot of money to it for a sci-fi film. It had a top cinematographer, a top composer, a top editor as well, Hugh Fowler, who was also known for working with Schaffner, and also worked on Patton and so on. He also edited he edited Gentlemen Prefer Blondes as well, the 7-Year Itch, the blown skirt scene. That's all I really wanted to say about it. It's a fairly tight film in its way, 112 minutes. Reasonably efficient. It's quite languid in its first act. You can sort of see it's in the same era as a sort of 2001, quite languid. In some respects, when things like Apocalypse Now came along, which couldn't have happened until obviously after Vietnam, It almost felt a throwback to this era. Films that just like took their time and were quite happy to have the sort of lead characters observing as much as being active. So it's a film of its time. In terms of what I think about it, I quite like it. I think that's all I can say. It's Charlton Heston's a bit of a negative for me. I'm not a big fan of his at all, but I appreciate what they're doing here. I appreciate they're putting something on screen that's never been attempted before, and they're putting people in these sort of ape outfits, which frankly could have drawn laughs and killed the film instantly. So this was a relatively high budget experiment that could have become infamous had audiences not responded to it. Had they just gone, that looks utterly ridiculous, and I can't follow the plot anyway, because the whole idea of like time dilation, which we'll come to at the start of the film, would have been fairly new to audiences. I think it's something we get now. So it's a gamble, fairly simple story, but some really nice sort of subversive ideas in there about class and a very defined caste system amongst the apes. So the more society evolves, the less it evolves almost. And you can see that in sort of modern politics, that the more we go forward, we end up sort of going backwards somehow and coming out with ever more simplistic messages. It's got some ideas about that religion as sort of a comfort blanket. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Charlie.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
a society. And I like it. There's nothing more iconic to come, but there are entries I probably enjoy more to come.
Becca, what do you think? What's your...
Yeah, I'm the same as Chris, really. I mean, you probably know this anyway, but all my knowledge about Planet of the Apes comes from that Simpsons episode where Troy McClure ends up doing a musical about the Planet of the Apes.
I was going to share that at some point with the chat.
Yeah. Literally, that is where all my knowledge of this comes from. I think I've seen this first film ages ago, and then I've obviously seen the more recent the Andy Serkis films when they were released at the cinema. Sadly, I've not seen them since. I'm looking forward to going back and revisiting those. I might have seen the Mark Wahlberg one at the cinema, but I get no sort of memory. But it just being very, very messy and the ending very confusing. As much as I love Tim Burton as a director, so that'll be interesting to revisit this one. But
He looks like he needs to fart in every scene of that film.
Yeah, literally, that is like his number one priority.
I know, it just looks awful. But anyway, go on, sorry.
It's literally just shove it all together, see what happens.
And how did you get on with this film?
I just crack on with it. But yeah, I'm a bit of a newcomer as well, definitely. Chris mentioned the animated series on Sunday mornings.
No, it wasn't the animated. It was the
TV series.
Yeah.
That's a cartoon as well, definitely.
I don't remember the cartoon.
Yeah, the TV series. I think I might have had like a vague memory of that, like late night BBC or something, for example. But yeah, I was only just recently become aware of like the animated series and also the Japanese spin-off. Well, not really a spin-off, but its own kind of series as well, which was choppily edited and hastened down from like a proper series to like a 2.5 or hour and a half movie for American audiences, which is very crazy indeed. I believe that's on YouTube, which I've forgotten the name of, but I'll check it out and maybe send a link on our social media channels. Yeah, so it's been quite interesting to read around this. I've sadly not read the original novel, but I should look out for it if I come across it and definitely give it a read. For me, I like all the social aspects of it, like for example the commentary on society, on religion, the different caste system, between the relationships between like orangutans and apes, and gorillas, for example, and the kind of the social structure that they have. I definitely agree about the whole use of using religion as a crutch and as a comfort blanket for sure. The whole reason that they don't progress is because like the maker and the creator is kind of basically just held up in so high esteem that nothing else they're contributing it, basically. And also commentary on kind of like race and race relations and that, which is obvious, but again really important and quite prescient today, unfortunately. But yeah, I wasn't aware that it was like the behemoth that of just having all these sequels, remakes, cartoon, toys, TV series, Simpsons parody. So it's quite exciting to discover this massive I don't know what you call it, this really legendary iconic series. But yeah, so pretty much all my knowledge comes from that Simpsons episode. I think that's really clever. And yeah, the twist was kind of ruined for me a little bit by that. But yeah, I'm sort of looking forward to sort of really getting into it really, and sort of discovering. Because I've sort of read reviews of the later sequels as well, and it kind of gets, progressively worse as you go along. I think depending on which critic you read. But for a film that was that's clearly this iconic, I think it's such a shame that it does kind of not get worse, but just kind of like decline. It seems to me that the standard does decline a little bit, so I'm a little bit like, oh, what a shame. But yeah, considering the universe and the world of this film is so wide ranging, I'm looking forward to diving into it and obviously learning about what you guys have to say about it. So
it's kind of a hard film to really review in a proper sense, because it is almost so iconic. You watch it and you think, well, in a way because it's so established that you kind of already with it, you've seen a lot of it, of what other films have done beyond it before, and so you watch it now, like today, and you're thinking, this is such. At the time, was it way like ahead of its time, or was this like, was it kind of like as obvious as it is now? Because I look at the twist, so to speak, which is like, it was Earth all along. God damn it!
Spoiler alert.
I mean, it's on the poster. I mean, now it's on the poster.
It's many years old.
You can't avoid it now.
But like, it feels like it's so telegraphed, because the what's the ape, the what's his name? I'm gonna just quickly look now.
Dr. Zaius.
Yeah, Dr. Zaius. Yes, that's it. He, I know. I realise, and I'm more like asking this really, because I realise I'm saying it knowing what the twist, and knowing that it was Earth all along. It feels like it knew that, and it was hinting that the entire time. Like, Dr. Zaius knew that this is Earth. You're definitely on Earth in a way, but just didn't want everyone to know.
I knew the twist before I saw the film, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. So it's kind of almost like hard, really, to kind of like, because it's so, everything about it's so iconic, and and other films have lifted from this film, or have like parodied it, or like acknowledged it in some way.
I think they made an obvious mistake by filming it on Earth. That's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah.
They should have filmed it on the actual planet,
Yeah. But the only thing I will add though is I actually quite found the actual makeup actually really, really well done.
Actually, considering the time when it was made, I was quite impressed. The effects and makeup largely held up.
Because David's right, this is a bit of a challenging thing, to sort of like have like just a bunch of actors in monkey suits and go, oh, well, that's plausible. but actually, I was actually sort of spent a lot of the time actually watching like the masks, and yes, like they're not like, you tell they're just rubber masks, but you can actually sort of see the performance in there as well. It's not just like, oh, there's a bit of like, the lips moving in the lips.
Mouth, but that's probably testament to makeup artist and the actor as well. That you can have that synergy, and you can obviously emote through all the layers of latex, etc., etc.
Yeah, but I just that was one of the things, cause given that it's like made like, it's still in the 60s. It felt really, really well done. I mean, I watched it with a girlfriend a few days ago when we watched it, and she thought she didn't think it was like as old as it was. She was like, oh, it's just still in the 60s. I was like, yeah. So it does. I think it's done well. Up. They've done well with what they had.
I would agree, definitely. I think there was probably one moment where you could see, I think it's maybe during like an argument sort of scene, and you could see like the real actor's face kind of just beneath the mask, just very briefly, and that kind of takes you out of the moment. But otherwise, it's very convincing. And I've got a fun fact coming up about the makeup at the end of the show. But no, I do think it is, for what it's worth, definitely. I think one of the great hallmarks of this film is kind of like sort of obviously the costumes and the makeup, and I think that's something that we'll continue to point out as we go through the series.
Okay, Charlie. Sort of initial thoughts on the film. We've talked about the series, but this specific entry.
Yeah, I think it's a masterpiece. I mean, yeah, like I said, I've been watching it for a long time. It's kind of it's always kind of embedded itself in my head as just an incredibly important film, and that didn't change at all when I watched it today. I mean, I can agree with the criticisms on Charlton Heston, but on the other hand, he is kind of there's got to be signs of PTSD in there, and considering one friend has been killed and stuffed, and the other one has been lobotomized, and just the whole kind of reversal.
That's unsettling. The lobotomy.
Yeah.
That really freaks me out. I mean, the kind of the fate of his other crewmen that is terrifying. But yeah, I think that bit just really, I wince just thinking about it. It was very unsettling indeed.
I don't think there's ever been a time when I've watched this film and it's not been relevant in some way to what has been going on in the world.
No, it's a film that keeps on giving, really, isn't it? I think,
especially today with the fight between Brigden and the fact that Zaius is both the Minister of Science and the kind of defender of the faith, and that it's kind of that contradiction is obviously with a certain person in the Oval Office.
Could you be more specific, Charlie?
Well, they're all kind of
there are many Oval Offices, so
yeah, there are many, quite a few at the moment. But no, yeah, I would agree. It's extremely prescient many years on.
The way religion has kind of come back in a big way with Trump, and the way it's kind of fighting against science as well, and basically the way that religion is changing science or changing what they say science is, and the results.
Sorry, Charlie.
Sorry, no. So, I mean, when you look at the coronavirus and it's come out and they're just lying through their teeth, but behind them is a constant thing about faith and about Christianity and about religion. So it's got it there as well.
I think with why it always proves relevant is I think these themes are always there, whatever, in society in some form, because I think it's just part of the human condition. Science and religion are all kind of almost like interlinked. They're pretty much like the same thing. I think for what religion is for a lot of people is how you make sense of the world, and so is science. So I think the two are very, very almost at odds, but also like interlinked with one another. And I think that's always going to happen in society. So I think in a way, a film like this is always going to be relevant in some sort of capacity, because it touches on those issues, because those issues are always going to be with us.
What you said before about the twists, I mean, it's kind of nowadays. I mean, I guess the Sixth Sense has always been the marker for me when it whole started, and it came to this thing where it began to be something people started to look out for.
Yeah.
And then they started marketing on twists, and it's kind of almost like a sport where people did you guess the twist, that kind of thing.
So is this the initial like the film that did the thing with the twist? Now is this what we all?
Well, not really, but
no.
I don't think we were looking for a twist, were we? If we were watching this in 1968.
No, but it had it because it came and because it was originally written by the guy who created the Twilight Zone. That kind of show was kind of predicated on not so presenting a twist, but presenting these kind of interesting science fiction ideas, where it was so much more about different perceptions and different angles than just the kind of more kind of Flash Gordon type stuff that was more in the kind of the 40s and the 50s. So like for instance, the Time Again at Last, the Twilight Zone episode with Burgess Meredith, where he's the guy that never has got a nagging wife, and he never gets a chance to read, never gets a chance to do what he's want, and then there's a giant nuclear war, and everyone dies except for him. So he goes into the library, and he's got everything to read, and all the time in the world, and his glasses break.
So yeah, like there's see, even that itself has always been like in a way. It's always been in other stories. Like, you know, I always think of there's probably something in The Simpsons or something like that, where people's glasses break and things like that at that pivotal moment. But yeah, it's always that sweet irony, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the guy, because Rod Serling wrote it, and then his script was rewritten by a guy by Michael Wilson. Obviously not the Bond Michael Wilson, because he's a much more terrible writer. But this Michael Wilson,
better actor though.
Actually, yeah,
You didn't consider her slimed.
he was blacklisted. He originally he did some writing on It's a Wonderful Life, wasn't credited, and won the Academy Award in 1951 for A Place in the Sun, and then because of the whole blacklisting thing, he was blacklisted, and he moved to France to work in Europe.
Was that the McCarthy witch hunts, Charlie?
Yes, it was. The House of Un-American Activities Committee.
That's infected their national psyche ever since.
Yes.
Because the inbuilt fear of anything that can be perceived as communist and socialist, which they don't know the difference between anyway, has just pushed them quite violently in the other direction. Again, we're not going to make a huge amount of politics in this show because it's not what we do. But obviously, there has to be a little bit of scene setting with this. And it doesn't shock me to hear that somebody blacklisted in McCarthy Witch Hunts has written something like this.
Yeah, because he also wrote Bridge on the River Kwai, uncredited,
Right.
and Lawrence of Arabia, co-wrote Lawrence of Arabia.
I didn't know that. Lawrence of Arabia is still probably the most gorgeous looking film I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and it's in 1995, the Academy Award finally gave him a nomination for the screenplay.
It's funny, the one thing I will just say, just in passing, is a lot of the people involved with this film died quite young. Awful lot of them seem to die in their 60s or something like that. Not criminally young, but like 20, 30 years too early.
Yeah.
And
Smoking.
I think that could be it, basically, yeah. What did he die? He died of a heart attack, but yeah, I mean, that can still be related to the same thing. Yeah, Lawrence of Arabia, originally uncredited. So what that's telling me is people wanted his skills, but not his name at this point.
Yeah.
Right the way through. In fact, he's uncredited. His filmography splits roughly into two halves. Right the way through to Salt of the Earth in 1954, his name's on it, with the exception of It's a Wonderful Life, but there could be any number of reasons for that. And then the second half of his career, apart from the last two or three things, right the way through to Lawrence of Arabia says originally uncredited. And in one case, he's accredited as James O'Donnell.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works exactly, whether it was kind of where they weren't able to be credited legally.
Yeah. Posthumously.
Because if he's blacklisted by the government, then
it's qualified name. Not he won't. Yeah. Okay. So, rules of the blacklist. Yeah. There's one There's one film where he's not. No one's credited. Like technically, no one wrote it. Bridge on the River Kwai. The official credit went to Pierre Bouillet.
yeah, the writer of the novel.
Yeah. Which is just nuts, because you can't just film a novel, literally. And his last film was Che, but not obviously the modern version of Che.
Yeah.
Che Guevara. So you can see his political influences through the work. You totally can.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Yes.
Now, the first question I had when I watched this. What's their mission? Do you know, Charlie?
Space. The final frontier.
The Final Frontier.
I'm guessing.
I don't remember them taking
That's-
that over, Chris.
The mission was not to leave the one female astronaut behind.
Well,
but,
that's the one thing,
dear.
because I thought, you're not starting a new society, are you? Because a gangbang's not the way to do it.
No. Well, not by the way she ends up anyway.
They kind of mention that though, don't they? They kind of.
She didn't make it, sadly.
No, but if she had made it, surely that's the wrong ratio of men and women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was just an exploration thing.
Okay. So the first bit we get is him narrating before he's about to go into deep sleep. They've been 6 months in space at this point. But nearly 700, is it nearly 700 or just over 700 years have passed?
I think, yeah, but
It's just over because you've got the Earth chronometer says 1972 and their chronometer says 2673.
yeah.
And then he goes, I'm going Betty buys now. And then
I'm just gonna have this cigarette and.
Just gonna have to smoke the cigarette first.
And smoke
Go
Gilbert.
outside for a fag.
Yeah. I'll just put out my cigarette.
Please, I can't
Wait,
think of
music.
Charlton Heston without the Ralph Garman like kind of impression. Yes.
I gave her a pearl necklace.
It's that or the
That's
Wayne's World
weird,
cameo
that's
where he's like where he just turns up as the good actor.
Right.
He just shows up like as a like, oh, can we get a better actor? And he just pull out Charlton Heston.
Gordon Street.
Yeah. Oh yes.
I once knew a girl on Gordon Street.
Yeah.
That's just a little bit of prologue before the music and the credits and all the rest of it. And when we come out from that, they are 18 months into their journey, waking up, and now it's 2,000 years after their departure. So we're now on Earth in, I am looking this up because I couldn't remember, 3978. 2,000 years on. Not quite how evolution works, but there you go. And there's been a malfunction, so there's 3 men and a woman, and the woman's dead, and she's decayed as well.
Yeah. So there's a crack on the screen, isn't there?
Yes. And they've aged slightly in that, like, one of them's got a bit of grey at his temples and that.
They all
And
grow
so they
beards.
yeah. Oh yeah, they didn't grow any beard in the first 6 months, but shitloads in the last 12. So that's how that works. They crash in water, and when they sort of get out and start looking around, I don't know where this was filmed. It looks a bit sort of Death Valley, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it must have been absolutely.
Maybe Arizona. I don't know.
Let's have a look. Let's see if I can see.
Yeah,
where-
it's definitely sort of California, Arizona,
Colorado.
It's northern
Colorado,
Arizona.
yeah, along Colorado desert, definitely. So
Most of the early scenes, I am reading this, most of the early scenes of a desert-like terrain were shot in northern Arizona near the Grand Canyon, the Colorado River, Lake Powell, Glen Canyon, and other locations near Page, Arizona.
I can definitely recommend visiting the Lake Powell area. Very pretty. Lots of you kind of get a whiff of like the big country, as it were, and just the epic landscape.
Watch out for the apes, though.
Yeah, watch out for the apes. Watch out for the marauding apes. But generally,
And some very bizarre scarecrows.
I
Yeah.
think they're
I mean,
scary. I think those and the scarecrows from Live and Let Die are, not to draw a comparison between the two, obviously, but terrifying in the way that movie scarecrows generally go.
See, I remember the scarecrows. I remember like what region like this is like going back in the 90s, but like total film. And I remember like sort of like seeing like a picture, and it had like at least people in apes costumes sort of doing like that sort of scarecrow stance. So this is before I saw the film anyway. So, but I always thought that that was at one point there was like a load of apes doing that. Which always kind of confused when it came to the film because it's like, oh, right, well, the scarecrow's there. So at first I thought maybe like there might be like sort of punishment or crucifixion or something like that, but no, they're just scarecrows. I don't know if that came up at all. No, just me. Okay.
No, it's not ringing any bells to me at all.
No, it could be the Mandela effect.
Could be. It was a long time ago. Or it could just be like a publicity still that just never was in the film at all. I don't know.
Could be, yeah. I want to go back to when the ship crashes. There's talking about the cinematography earlier. There was an amazing the shot for me. Because there's the point of view stuff, and then the ship crashes, and then you see the ship kind of pointing out of the ocean, and it's a really skew angle, and the way the camera just kind of whips around and then kind of pulls away, and then finally goes onto a horizontal kind of status. And it's just that shot has always been just, I've always just thought that was just an amazing shot.
It's off to a really positive start. I mean, just even that idea of time dilation, we get it now.
Yeah.
That depending on your speed, location, and everything else, time can move differently in different, where you are. And this would have been not the easiest concept in 1968. And it gets it across simply and effectively. And they've landed somewhere that's familiar but not familiar. Obviously familiar because it's shot on Earth, and an Earth North Americans would recognise, but they don't know where they are. They don't know why they're there. We don't know why they're there, and that's kind of interesting in its own way, because it's like, is there some reveal here? They're going to go wandering around. Taylor is kind of enigmatic with his crew in that he's kind of almost talking in riddles to them. He's not really being overly clear about anything, and they're wandering around, and then all of a sudden they decide to skinny dip with well-placed foliage. And let's get our bottoms up. I checked in on Becca the other day. She said, I'm watching the film now. I've just got to the bit where Charlton Heston's got his butt out, she said. So I was like,
I literally just started the film, and I was like, well, I've seen his butt now, so I've got that, and obviously from my cold dead hands as president of the NRA.
Was there ever a time where anyone actually thought, to Charlton Heston getting his kit off? It doesn't strike me as like a pin-up type. I don't mean that in a necessarily mean way.
Doing it in the remake,
but do you know what I mean? It doesn't scream heartthrob to me.
It's also the fact that the crew set off, and there's like 3 men and a woman who I think is fairly attractive. I think we see her before she decays.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, this is gonna be a bit grown up. Wonder what hijinks they'll all get up to. And they immediately decay the woman, and the blokes get their asses out. It's like, all right.
Also, a bit further on, there's a scene where all 3 of them are naked after skinny dipping, and it's shot in a very strange angle. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. They try to get as much of their nether regions in without the cock as possible. When you look at the film, it is like watching Austin Powers, only the dick's covered quite often.
Yeah, it's a bit strange.
And it's like,
but as I say, was he that kind of masculine icon though? Was he kind of known? Is kind of more known more for his acting chops rather than for his physique?
When he was in Ben-Hur, and then he was in El Cid and things like that, and he was also in a film called Secret of the Incas, which is kind of
I've seen that.
A big influence. It's not a very good film. I saw it recently, but it was a really big influence on Raiders of the Lost Ark. Right. Down to the fact that basically Indiana Jones wears literally the same costume as Charlton Heston did.
Ooh.
And he was a very similar kind of character as well. So I think he was to a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not.
He does spend a lot of the time half naked in this film. Not that I'm commenting on male bodies or anything like that, but just compared, compared in contrast to the other apes and other species in the film. Just as a point of contrast, really, about who is actually the more cultured and sophisticated. So,
it does strike me how apparently there was something going on with the female pasture between Charlton Heston, the character, and because they reference to it, and then she dies immediately, and it's like, don't matter, don't care. It's like, so you're not very caught up with I forget what the character.
Yeah, they do characterize him quite cold and
cynical. Yeah,
it's been 100 years. I was thinking, what's the point of saying
that?
Everyone
you ever known's dead.
Like... Well, this one he starts off with the narration when he's recording his log, and he says, "Does man still make war against his fellow brother?" So they immediately kind of position him as a very cynical, kind of almost nihilist.
It kind of works. The only thing I will say, if this film's got a flaw, this first act is just ever so slightly too long, because I'm glancing and we're like half an hour in, and they're still kind of wandering around. The meat of this film is all crammed into about 70 minutes, really. It's not a major flaw, but it could pick up the pace ever so slightly, but there's value to them not knowing where they are and being a bit confused in and of itself. What I do like, and I am making fun of it here a little bit, is they happen across like a plant, and it's like vegetation, life. And as they walk around a bit more, just before they get naked in skinny dip, they see like a couple more plants, but they're clearly just like shoved in there that morning. There's no way that plant grew there.
Yeah, I like the fact that, oh, look, there's a plant. Let's dig it up.
Yeah.
Let's just take it. Could be like the only one there for like miles. And
I guess as well, it's a lot more subtle, and obviously, if you've seen the next film, it comes up a lot more. But when you think again about the time, the era when this was filmed, you had World War II ending with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then you had like the Suez Missile Crisis and stuff like that, and all the kind of tension over Cuba, and who had nuclear weapons and stuff like that. So when you think about the plant growth and whether that's been irradiated.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so is where we are safe as well. So yeah, there is that, I guess, and we don't know where we are. Is there any sign that this will grow enough to feed us and that sort of thing? So I can sort of see several things around that. But the key point of the first sort of half an hour, apart from where they are, noting they've aged a bit, noting Taylor's slight coldness about all of it and cynicism. Coldness is the wrong word, but cynicism. They go for this skinny dip, and it's basically to bathe, effectively. And their clothes are stolen. And we definitely see the hands of the people stealing, and they're not apes at this point. So we assume humanoids of some description have stolen their clothes. We see sort of like scarecrows. And then what? They sort of chase after their clothes, effectively, don't they?
Yeah.
They go back to try and grab it all back. And they end up kind of in a field with a bunch of like humans who don't talk. And it's not clear at this stage whether they can or they're just not accustomed to. I'm not sure the series ever fully explains that. But suddenly, when they think these humans might be the enemy or a problem, suddenly there's a bigger enemy. You get quite a disturbing noise from like the trees nearby. And I remember that noise. It was quite disturbing. On the big screen, that must have been quite good, certainly if the score was ever like remixed into several channels. And basically they're attacked by gorillas on horseback, raiding this cornfield, and we'll find out that we've basically got effectively chimps, effectively gorillas, and effectively orangutans, and they've all got different sort of roles within the society. The gorillas tend to be very sort of
they're military, aren't they? They're
military, and that's the same in the remake because Michael Clark Duncan plays one. The chimps tend to be sort of science, and the orangutans tend to be sort of government and ministry. Is that fair?
I think that's also carried,
like
that's carried through
figures.
the whole series, isn't it, as well, that structure?
like
Even in the remake
figures.
and the reboot series.
Sorry, Chris?
I just said like authority figures, really.
Yeah, and the two Taylor's two companions do have names, but it's not that important, really. One of them is Dodge and Landon. One is killed, and the other one's like knocked unconscious. And we will see both of them later on in one way or another. And Taylor's sort of taken into town, really, and he gets a blood transfusion from what we'll learn is Zira and... Actually, it's not Cornelius at this stage, is it? It's her surgeon.
Spoiler.
But Zira... Yeah. And he's been shot in the throat, so he can't speak. So they don't know he's advanced. And he's basically caged, and it does look a little bit... It's evocative of the cage, the sort of zoo Caesar's put in Rise.
Yeah.
Did anyone else get that vibe? in like a cage with a bit of straw
Yeah, definitely.
sprayed with
There's a big
water.
callback to that. Well, call forward
Oh, yeah.
to that, definitely.
I think it felt very deliberate, like role reversal. Like, you know,
Yes.
it's because I think the thing, because this is very much like a Twilight Zone-esque story. It felt very much like landing on a planet and then finding out everything's just reversed back. You know, so you're like the caged animal, and you know, and it's like we'll see how you like that kind of perspective. So I think that's kind of what they were going for. But the Zorakors in Bright Eyes, which was like a reference that's made in the remake, because the Caesar is called Bright Eyes, isn't he? Or they make reference to that, don't they? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he is.
Yes, because the virus he's given, or he's born having ingested effectively, has coloured his eyes. You'll see it. The eyes are different colours in the enhanced apes.
Yeah, which is a reference that I obviously didn't appreciate initially, but I was like watching this now. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I can.
Yeah, that's where that comes from.
And the bright eyes is obviously the baby blues, but also the spark of intelligence in his eyes that they can recognise.
Yeah.
So, what order is? So they take out the bullet. They give him,
they try and make him mate with one of the other females.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this. They put him in with someone he ends up calling Nova. Linda Harrison. Linda Harrison is the actress. She was only about, again, big age gap. She's only about 22 when she's making this film.
I think she was like the girlfriend or wife of a producer or something like that.
Second wife of producer Richard D. Zanuck, known for Jaws amongst a lot of other things. He's passed away now. I don't know if she still works now. I'm just looking to see. She was still doing bits and pieces till the middle of the last decade. Nothing that big, although she's in obviously next week's, and she's in both Cocoon films. And she has got a small cameo in the Planet of the Apes remake. So I don't know what to make of this, because I don't know how smart these humans are. They can't speak, or they're not accustomed to speaking. But we don't go into it any further than that.
It's just kind of like
it's a bit unexplained, really, isn't it? It's kind of like, are they sort of like cave men and women, cave people, or sort of like Neanderthals as we would sort of recognise, I guess. But yeah, it's never really explained how these human type individuals are unevolved, I guess, or not as evolved as we would seem it to be.
I imagine they're just sort of like kind of like a very sort of primitive version of us, which kind of like going off basic instincts but don't really speak. I think that's the only way you can sort of look at it, because obviously, like they've de-evolved to a degree. As the apes have taken over, they've kind of gone down the steps, so they've kind of like started to that's how I read it. They kind of just sort of.
I think so, but what I mean is, it doesn't go in this direction. But were he to mate with Nova here, would that be immoral? Yeah. I don't know.
It seems a bit weird how he would be so eager to kind of like, well, come on then, well, I'll mate. I'm happy to take you with me, and we'll mate. Whatever.
We get this with Estrella Warren in the remake as well. That's a woman who didn't have the career we thought she was going to have. But the basic gist of what's coming along now is Dr. Zaius, who's the head of the Ministry of Science or whatever it is, he comes in and he can't.
It's going to happen.
He comes in and Zira's like, look, there's something about this one, and he's not convinced, but she is, that he's got intelligence. And I think, how far do we go on? Yeah, we see him like writing in the sand in his outdoor cage. They're used for experiments. They're used for slavery. They're used for a lot of things, really, the humans. But they're just the playthings of the apes, really. But Zira, as a scientist and a doctor, kind of is doing sort of behavioural studies on them.
Yeah.
He steals her notepad.
Yeah, that's quite key, because he can't talk. But he can
and then he gets beaten up by the.
Yeah, that's the one thing. In reality, if like an ape beat you, fucking kill you.
Yeah.
But
They're
then
kind of
this is like this version's so because obviously I think you could argue that these apes have evolved like us and probably are.
Yeah, that's what I always thought.
They're
Yeah.
hairy humans now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of like the yeah.
But yeah, so he starts communicating to Zira, puts on the notebook his name and all that sort of thing. And Zira and Cornelius, that's the first appearance in this of Roddy McDowall, who play a different character going forward. Well, he's Cornelius, I think, for a few weeks, but he becomes Caesar later on, otherwise known as Rocky Jr. Zira's not complete. Cornelius isn't completely convinced, but he describes where the ship went and what's happened to like all of that. And it turns out he was in something called the Forbidden Zone, which isn't that well explained at the moment. But this is key to all of the themes of the film, isn't it? Keeping society unaware of reality in order to serve the mythology they're based on.
Yeah, it's like, you know, to know this would deconstruct everything else. So let's preserve what we know now to keep things as they are.
Yeah. So Cornelius believes apes have evolved from basically lower forms of life, including humans. And again, none of that's ever completely explained, but doesn't wildly matter. Cornelius claims to have been into the Forbidden Zone at one point, and there's evidence of a civilization, an older civilization. And again, this is all signposting where the film goes if you know what you're looking for. But if you're watching this first time, you may not think anything of this. And the next thing, Taylor is ordered to be castrated.
Yeah.
Which seems a bit harsh. If you're going to be locked away, at least give him something to play with.
Yeah, but don't want him multiplying and spreading his intelligence.
Right. So he escapes, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where he kind of he comes across one of his fellow astronauts.
Stuffed.
Yes.
In basically a museum as a kind of a sort of primitive society display.
Yeah.
Again, like one of our museums.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been into like natural history museums and seen stuffed animals. They would not view that any different.
Yeah.
And when he's captured, he finally recovers his voice, which isn't even faint. It works perfectly. Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes.
Mm. Which will be a call back to when we do the remake, or the reboot series, because it kind of works exactly the same way, but an opposite, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I remember seeing an interview with Tim Roth where he talked about how tough he found making the scenes with Charlton Heston because of who Charlton Heston was by that point, turning up where there've been gun atrocities and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he just said it was just a question of do the lines, get it over with.
Oh no, it's about the Rise by the Apes.
Yeah, doesn't the Harry Potter kid, doesn't he say that?
Yeah, he said yeah.
Oh, he does. Sorry, no, I was thinking
and it was like the no, which kind of makes him go, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. There's lots to be said about
which itself is a callback to the fourth film.
The fourth film,
Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.
I've only seen it once, so as much as I remember really liking it, I don't get the reference at this point. But obviously, so we'll.
Yeah.
Okay. What else then? We're whipping through it at this point, don't we?
Yeah.
Quite quickly to like effectively a court case.
Yeah, and then he finds out that is it during his trial that because he's put on trial.
Yeah,
he is.
But
there's something a bit Roman amphitheatre about some of the outside as well.
And it's during the trial as well that they go and see the other guy, Landon.
Yeah,
and
he says like, he'll tell me.
Landon. I think it is to prove like Landon's not smart. What you're talking about, and it's because when he turns around, he's been lobotomized.
That's horrible.
It's a grim visual.
Yeah,
it's a great reveal.
It's a wince
Yeah.
every single time. You think, oh,
the way it's done with one half of his face, and you see his hair in normal, and then you turn it around and it's like all the hair's been shaved away. Oh, that's just...
Yeah. He turns around and he's Locutus of Borg. It's a little bit like that reveal, but a bit grimmer than that. It is grim. It is grim, and it's to embarrass Taylor, really, to basically say, well, you say you've got like smart mates, well, there's one of them, and he's not.
This is where, as well, we learn Cornelius has theories as well, based on, because he's an archaeologist.
Yes.
So based on previous digs he's been on, which it turns out was in the Forbidden Zone.
Yeah. Taylor can't enter any evidence into this trial at all because he's a human. He claims there were other talking humans when they arrived. That's actually the leading into the bit we've just talked about.
Yeah.
What was that? Where do we go from there? Taylor loses his shit and calls Zaius a liar. I'm reading this at the moment because I'm struggling for where we go next.
Yeah, and then Zaius calls him into his private, because the trial kind of adjourns.
Yeah.
And then Zaius calls him into his private thing and says he's going to dissect it, and he's going to perform surgery on the speech center of his brain.
Right.
Unless.
But yeah, because he actually he knows what he's saying is true, but
because he heard Lantern talk.
But what he says is, I think there's more of you, and I think you're a threat. So
yeah.
So tell me where you are. I think he tries to strike a deal with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So he believes that there is a sort of tribe beyond the Forbidden Zone. Taylor's still saying he comes from a distant planet, which they both think they're right.
Yeah.
So when you realise at the end of it, he's not lying. Earlier in the film, he claims they're like 320 light years from home or something, which he's wrong on, obviously. So Taylor does escape, doesn't he?
Yeah, they go to get him for castration.
Yeah.
Because again, the guard is really kind of nasty about it.
Yeah. So he escapes with Nova.
Yeah, he gets broken out by
Lucius.
He's blatantly playing like a high school teenager.
He's got like him though.
He's got that. Oh, Dad. He's got that kind of.
He is a kid, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
And
but basically, Cornelius and Zira are basically going to take them to this Forbidden Zone to see if they can find this evidence of the primitive society that Cornelius believes he's seen, and it will prove them all sort of innocent. So it's basically a bit of a desert trek at this point, and it's a cave. They get to a cave by the beach, which again, in the geography of the United States, wouldn't necessarily quite work, but it doesn't matter. And they get caught just before they're about to go in, don't they?
Yeah, there's a bit of a fight, and he takes Dr. Zaius. He takes him hostage. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. He takes that.
Rather you than me.
He takes him hostage and tells everyone to back off, which they all do. And then they go in the cave and then they have a nice chat.
And they're allowed to go in eventually. And when they go in, it's like a real dark, dingy cave, but it's got like human artifacts in there, like a toy doll, human doll, which isn't evidence until they activate it and it kind of cries or speaks or something like that.
Yeah, it says "mama," doesn't it?
Yeah, so it's like, okay. So yeah, it's when it speaks, it's like, well, why would apes make a human doll do that? And then there's like more of a fight outside, and Zaius is trapped, orders the soldiers to like back off, and Taylor basically says, I want like food, ammunition, and I'll let Zaius go.
Yeah, because
And
that's when Zeus admits he knows he knew it all before.
Yeah, so he admits he knew, and he kept it sort of out of the public sort of the public domain. And they read sort of a scroll, and the writings of the scrolls, it says here in the sort of synopsis, it gives a dire warning about man and the danger he presents. Now, I'm not quite sure when that's from in their sort of history and ours.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's in the Apes history, isn't it? That they wrote initially.
It's not it's post our history from today's perspective.
Yes, the 29th scroll or something from there.
Right. He sort of says, I don't hate humans, I fear them. It's for what they were, and then we get the sort of era this film is made in, because it's the reference to war. It's the reference to the fact that humans were destructive. And of course, we're living in an era of the height of the Cold War at this point. So the fear of like nuclear Armageddon was like, sorry?
Vietnam as well.
Vietnam
had not been long. Because one thing that I noticed today that I'd never noticed before is in the initial scene where the apes are introduced, there is a scene where one of the gorillas takes a photo of several other gorillas standing on the corpses of the humans.
Right.
Kind of like a hunter kind of thing.
That is direct. Pretty sure that's a direct reference to Vietnam.
Right. No, I get it. You, Chris, you were thinking of trophy hunting, I think. Yeah.
Well, that sort of thing as well. It could be trophy hunting.
Yeah. Okay. So
this film was noted for its raising of animal rights issues as well. But yeah, I'd probably draw the just in the time it was made. I'd probably draw the Vietnam War correlation.
But it becomes clear we're in a post-apocalyptic society now. So whatever happened with man, it did end in Armageddon.
And in bloodshed. Oh dear.
Yeah. Which is where everyone in the 60s would have been convinced we were heading. And so Taylor wants to go deeper in to try and understand everything that had happened, why his culture no longer exists, or he doesn't think it's his culture at the moment, does he? Why the human culture on that planet, quote unquote, doesn't exist anymore. So he says goodbye to Cornelius and Zira, as a bit of a cheeky snog with Zira, who makes a joke about how ugly, I kiss you, but you're so ugly.
I think we'll have to compare like human simian kisses between this one and the whole Mark Wahlberg and HBC later on in the series. I think we'll have to sort of compare and contrast who did it best.
They make Bonham Carter's eyes up as prettily as humanly possible in that film.
Yeah.
Even makeup, I think she's so glamorous, and she still looks. I don't think
she's that attractive in life, but I think in that film she's like, they've made her the best looking ape you could ever imagine.
They could cover in all this kind of makeup to make it look really sort of dowdy, but actually they actually look quite glamorous.
I'll be honest.
Wasn't Tim Burton married to her at the time?
There we are. See, that's what it was.
So
so do you think at times he's gone like, go on love, put the monkey costume on?
They blow up the cave.
They blow up the cave. So basically that ape society is going to stay completely clueless.
Yeah.
And Taylor heads off with Nova into sort of along the beach, sort of into the distance to sort of see what he can learn. He's warned he may not like what he sees. And then the most famous shot.
He knew. It makes me think that he does kind of know that he's actually from this planet. I mean, it works both ways because it kind of like represents.
Zeus does believe he's from the Forbidden Zone. He doesn't believe Taylor when Taylor says, "I'm from another planet."
Yeah.
Taylor believes Taylor. But basically, they've gone out, time warped around for a few hundred years, and then just landed back in the same place. And basically we start to see sort of spikes sticking up, and it turns out to be the sort of crown on the Statue of Liberty. And then Taylor, grief-stricken, falls to the ground and wildly overacts. Credits. You blew it up. Damn you all to hell.
Sorry, go on.
That's sort of Ace Rimmer delivery there, Dave.
A lot of the sort of films of this era did have these kind of abrupt endings.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like a shock ending, and then we go, credits done.
And the credits to black with
Silence.
the noise of the ocean over them.
It's very shocking, isn't it? It's probably one of the most shocking endings of all, like, American cinema in this era. It's very on the nose, like, oh, and there's no explanation. There's no, oh, so this is what happened. This is how apes evolved. This is how we devolved. It just literally ends like, oh, it's Earth all along. Cut to credits, and it's like, oh, shock.
Yeah, but can you imagine it if you'd gone to like this, then like dinner? You'd have had a lot to talk about.
You would have, definitely.
Yeah.
It's one of those sort of cinematic moments where it like go see, like, I don't know, the first James Bond movie, or like the Charles Scenic Psycho, for example. It's one of those iconic movie moments where if you're not of that era, or if you weren't around at the time to see it, it's one of those sort of scenes where, like, I would have loved to have been around at the time to be able to see that film for the first time at the big cinema, just because it was such a shocking ending, and it's probably one of the most iconic, like, sci-fi movie endings, I think.
That's what pissed me off when they put it on the DVD cover.
Yeah, they did.
This is it, exactly.
The newest
It's like, I've got a box set and it's right on the front. It's just like, oh, spoiler alert.
I had that sort of orangey box set with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Later, I had the DVDs. Now I've just got rips, but I knew the twist, and it's like I'm not sure if I did because I remember when the remake came out. The woman I was living with at the time, her father came to visit around the time it visited it, and they both said to me, "Have you seen Planet of the Apes?" And I had to say honestly, I don't know, because it's so in popular culture, but I don't specifically remember reviewing.
Yeah.
So if you ask me to bet on it, I've not seen it, but I'm not sure if I knew the twist, even though it's that famous, which tells me I hadn't seen it. And then, of course, I go to get the box set, and it's got that on it, which is exactly what's on our cover photo at the moment. And it was like, okay, well, I guess that's what it is at the end of the film. But then the film becomes a pleasure of a different type.
Yes.
You start trying to watch it to think, how does this all hang together? And it hangs together just fine. Final thoughts from me. I haven't got a lot to add. There's better to come for me, but there's nothing more iconic to come. Don't like this leading man very much, but it's a really well put together, well thought through story that, had they continued with the high budget option, if you like, and sort of crafted all the sequels in this environment with Charlton Heston, maybe we would have explored it more and learnt a little bit more about how it came to be. Obviously, we get a sort of batshit coda to this next week, and then it changes direction. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that there are still elements of this film that remain unexplained. But unlike the Tim Burton remake, we're not left thinking, well, that's a load of shit, isn't it? It's just things we don't quite know how. I mean, and evolution does not happen that quickly. In 2,000 years' time, there won't be, anything approaching this. If we're still here in 2,000 years' time, I may not be, but
what, you may not be in 2,000 years' time?
Yeah, I may not be, unless I get some serious roughage into my diet. But I had a pretty good time with it. I'm a little bit fearful for next week because I just remember the second one being poor, but I might be wrong. We'll see. But we're off to a good start. We're off to a good start with what's a really varied series. We're going to go from this and an iconic film to something set a bit more analogous to present day. Then we're going to go to like the most up-to-date makeup effects you can ever imagine. Then we're going to go to like CG in the present day, and we're going to get a total mix of tones and ideas. So I'm looking forward to this. We're off to a good start though.
Yeah, similar for me. It's very much like a Twilight Zone kind of episode, but a feature length. It's iconic. Again, I'm not too sure on the lead actor, but part of me thinks that might be intentional, just because he kind of feels out of place, but then his character is out of place. So that might have been the thinking behind it. I don't know, but yeah, it's iconic. It flies by, and yeah, I had a good time with it. It's not been much more I can really add other than that really. But yeah, other than the I thought the makeup given this decade was actually really, really well done. The performances through the ape masks were great, I thought.
Okay, Becca.
Sorry. I was reading reviews of next week's film. Oh dear, I am not looking forward to it.
I didn't like it, but I'm interested to hear Charlie's thoughts.
I'm looking forward to going into unknown territory. Actually, with the
It's terrible for about 75% of the time, and then it suddenly gets amazing, and it ends really great as well.
I'll look out for the amazing part.
It's just because, like Dave said, you spend most of the time with James Franciscus, who is basically continuity Charlton Heston. It's kind of like Charlton Heston disappears, so they get a new Charlton Heston, and he's exactly the same.
It is like when you get like a TV spin-off of a show. It's like, Charlton Heston's like Irene Cara. And,
What?
a reference to 1980s fame there.
I was going to say.
But yeah, you cast someone who looks a bit like him on TV for like a cheaper remake of the same story. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
But the story, I've only seen it once, so everything I'm saying is the caveat that I can hardly remember it. But from memory, the decisions they make are at very least brave.
And yeah, it's mental. It's absolutely mental.
Yeah. So there's probably a 75% chance you'll watch it and go, this is fucking batshit. But there's a 25% chance you'll watch it and go, that's actually quite inspired. Well, good on them for trying. This was, American cinema around now is about to enter a sustained period of taking chances. And Beneath the Planet of the Apes is right at the sort of start of all that. But sorry, no, Becca, your thoughts on the film overall?
Oh, sorry. Overall, as I say, not very much to add really, apart from when I dig out my fun facts in a few minutes' time. I kind of enjoyed my time with it. I was quite intrigued by how sparse the film is. In terms of its theme as well, I was kind of expecting kind of a sort of typically lush score. I didn't get that at all. I like how as Charlie explained, some of the sounds were kind of made from like sort of stainless steel bowls that he used from his kitchen. I think that's really interesting. So knowing that about the score, I think I can appreciate it a little bit more, definitely. I thought kind of how like sparse and sort of primitive sounding and as you mentioned, very very experimental as well. Especially as we were kind of like during this era as well, we've got a very going more towards kind of like 60s, early 70s, again a lot of counterculture type movies, as you said. So that the kind of the score and like how kind of, I don't know, kind of experimental sounding it is, sort of fits with that. Something that's kind of going on the other way the other way. I'll definitely agree with Charlton Heston kind of being a man out of time. They're not kind of like obviously on his own planet. He's very much, to me, he kind of. I sort of mainly know him from this film, from like Ben-Hur, and also being involved with the NRA, which I deeply resent. And so he's kind of, to me, he's kind of like typical Hollywood masculinity, sort of like leading man sort of role. And for this sort of film, I would say, not miscast, but I would agree that he does kind of seem in the wrong film, in the wrong genre almost. I
wonder if it was Shatner.
Yeah, that's true. Would it be improved with William Shatner in the role? I put to you.
I mean, oddly, I could really believe. I could actually sort of see Shatner doing this.
Definitely. Well, I've got some fun facts about who else were considered for various roles. So it's that kind of era, that kind of genre of male actor, definitely. Makeup and effects, outstanding. I kind of thought, for a film that was sort of late 60s, early 70s, I thought it'd look a little bit ropey. But no, really, really impressed actually, and they still hold up 50, 60 plus years down the line, definitely. I mean, there's a couple of moments where just some of maybe the camera angles really don't help. And perhaps if you're watching like on Blu-ray or high definition, for example, you might see some cracks. But otherwise, holds up really well.
There was foliage in the way. I didn't see the cracks.
No, I did. Charlton Heston's crack. Oh my god. I think this is probably one of two films of that era to kind of feature nudity. Despite the rating of this film, I think the other one was like one of the Bible movies. I think like in the beginning, I think it might have been. It's a little fun fact about nudity.
And then God said, "Let there be tits."
That's
a Bible I can get on board with.
Let there be buns. No, obviously the film draws him.
Chester Morgan edition.
That's a good nickname. every money they had. Yeah, the film obviously draws important links between obviously like Vietnam, animal rights, for example, as well, talking about like vivisection and castration. Obviously, I mean, I'm not a man, but I was like, oh, cross my legs during that scene. And yeah, also that's because I'm just very much opposed to kind of any sort of like cruelty to animals or anything like that. So the lobotomy scene, like from that point of view as well, I did kind of. Obviously, you don't see it, but you just kind of see him with this massive scar across his head, and you just think, oh, it just makes me wince every single time. Yeah, put on themes of kind of obviously war and race relations as well. And it's interesting seeing the strata between like the chimps and gorillas and orangutans and all the other kind of different types as well. I think it's really interesting. So looking forward to studying that more as we go along. Yeah, I was shocked by the shock ending. Obviously I knew the twist, but it just kind of literally ends on really bang on the nose. I was like, oh, okay. But as I say, yeah, I wasn't until now. I wasn't aware of like all I was aware of the remakes and the reboot series, but I didn't know about like the sequels or any of the like the cartoon or the TV series, for example. I think Chris, you hit the nail on the head there, saying it just kind of feels like an extended Twilight Zone episode. It's very much kind of on that vein. I think it was, as Charlie was saying, it was meant to kind of like be originally a spin-off of that series, and it was developed from the novel into a movie. So yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of exploring more of this really interesting varied series. Deep breath.
Charlie, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's as before. I think it's such an important film, and just a kind of really a real icon of sci-fi. One of the things I'm always impressed whenever I watch it, how committed it is to itself. Certainly, obviously, when we watch the Tim Burton film, and when you think about other films of this ilk from later years, that kind of have to wink their way through it, and kind of. Whereas this has such a stark.
We're aware this might play a bit daft to some of you. Yeah, there's none of that in this.
Yeah, it's kind of, this is what's happening, and we're 100% committed to this, and I think that really, really works in its favour. And I watched it on Blu-ray today, and it's beautiful. It looks really, really beautiful.
It's a well shot film. It does look good. I mean, obviously the makeup dates it. We can't avoid that, but it's a good looking film, and it looks reasonably expensive. Whereas by the time we get to later entries, you can see it's kind of, well, it feels almost like a TV budget, although it isn't. It's more than that. You're still talking millions.
Yeah,
I actually think the thing that dates it the most is actually the spacecraft. Really, that's the one that sort of feels like, all right, that's that.
And all the smoking.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they were smoking in the 90s, I guess, but yeah, that as well.
Yeah, but by the 90s, you only smoked if you were evil.
Yes.
Or me. But the
or if you're Roger Moore with a big cigar.
The makeup as well. I mean, obviously, yeah, in comparison, it is dated, but I mean, taking it on its own self, and what you said earlier about. It's got that perfect balance of being able to communicate what the actor is doing, as well as still looking like it's a gorilla or it's a chimpanzee. I think the best actor in the film was Kim Hunter, Zero.
I was just about to say, because the work she does with her eyes is extraordinary.
Exactly, and she is brilliant. And yeah, the way she worked.
She's thought about that. I don't think she's just got incredibly expressive eyes, although she might do.
Yeah,
but it's like she's sat and thought about, I need to act under all this.
Yeah,
and it really works, because I knew the minute he said best actor in the film, I think he's going to say Kim Hunter.
Yeah.
And I can't disagree at all. She's superb.
Yeah.
And I'm looking her up now because I don't even know what she looks like out of makeup.
I mean, the scene where Charlton Heston kisses her at the end, and it cuts to Cornelius, and the expressions Rodney McDowell's given as well, where he's kind of so absolutely confused at seeing his fiancée being kissed by a human, and it's just brilliant. It's just that's the kind of thing that really makes these kind of films special for me. Maybe is that they're able to do that, and kind of for all as good as Rick Baker's makeup is in the remake. As far as I haven't seen it for probably since I saw it in the cinema, maybe.
Yeah, no, I saw it last year. I won't say any more than that. The makeup effects still stand up very well. The one exception is, what's his character called? Is it Thade?
Yeah, Tim Roth.
Tim Roth's character. They put like a perma frown on his face, and it doesn't move, so he looks strangely unexpressive because he's locked into one expression. But the rest of them, they've really sort of communicated subtlety of character type through the makeup.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say about the remake is they've designed a society you could imagine as an extrapolation of like evolved apes as we know apes now.
Yeah.
The set design and makeup on that film is an absolute thing of beauty, but that might be one of the only positive things to say about it.
Oh yeah, no, I think technically the film
is outstanding. Yeah,
and Danny Elfman's music as well.
Don't remember the score, but I'm sure I'll get to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But
cool. Yeah. Do you feel informed, Chris?
To be honest, no. I mean, as informative as Charlie is, I feel lacking of facts of some description.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when he said the best actor in the film is, and I said Kim Hunter, I pulled that out my arse because I didn't even know this film had actors in it. I was that unknowledgeable, and I was really shocked to find that the leading man wasn't Charlton Athletic Football Club. So I need some help.
Who can we turn to in this hour of darkness?
Thor.
Okay.
Surely he's the only one.
I ain't got a phone number for Thor though.
Oh.
So
Becca?
He hasn't got a phone, has he?
He hasn't got a phone.
He hasn't even got a phone, has he? Speak to Natalie Portman.
Is it Ragnarok?
I think it's probably all the fours. Just like
Where he says you don't have a phone.
Was he on Earth these days?
Have you ever heard of email? Do you have a computer? No, what for?
Yeah, although nobody on set
I
went.
think that's really funny.
And yeah, I like Ragnarok, but the problem is the sheer weight of jokes was getting to me by the end. It was just like everything in this film's a fucking joke. It was funny.
I kind of wonder if we're heading more towards, like, obviously with Wonder Woman movie coming out, we're kind of going more towards like very 80s retro junkie inspired.
But we know all about Wonder Woman. We don't know about Planet of the Apes.
No,
coming soon.
Wonder Woman. Well, yeah, we will do DC at some point. What a fucking disjointed series that's
going to be varied.
we might have to do that in 2 parts by the looks of it. I don't know. It might be like DC when it didn't know what it was doing. DC when it still doesn't know what it's doing. But it's
the extended universe remnants and the rest.
Zack Snyder's director's cut.
Oh Jesus.
Well, the director's cut's actually better than the theatrical, but that's not saying much. They're both shit. It's just the extended cut is better explained shit.
Which one, Batman or Batman vs Superman or Justice League?
No, that one. I haven't seen the Justice League.
That will be a 4 or 5 hour opus. That will be.
It's a mini series apparently.
Yeah.
I'll still watch it.
I'm
not going to pay.
Well, I'm not going to pay for it. No.
Not that I'm going to pirate it or anything.
No, nor am I.
No, of course not. Never.
It's just going to turn up on a USB that's plugged into my machine because that happens a lot. It happened with Parasite earlier in the year.
It magically appears just in the ether.
Fucking brilliant. Yeah. Still, we're delaying our enriched intelligence in the I think that's a word. Becca.
Yes, I've got some fun facts. I was kind of hoping Charlie might fill in the fun facts, but maybe not. So I'll just rip some ones that I've found randomly from the
that on him now.
Well, I was going to say something earlier, but I thought you mentioned a fun fact about makeup, so I thought I'd leave it until just in case there was
a fun fact.
If that fun fact
be an overlap.
All the ape effects are they're wearing like masks and makeup.
Bugger.
Shit. None of the actors
Oh,
actually
God,
look
well,
like
never mind.
simians.
Yeah, anyway, fun facts. Fun fact number one, the film's movie, what did I just say? The film's famous line, "Get your paws off me, you damn dirty ape," was voted the
Delivered
65th.
in that way, of course, but
Yes, definitely. So yeah, in 2005, for the 100 Years, 100 Quotes, AFI voted it the 66th greatest movie line ever. Fun fact number two, which I think is probably what Charlie was going to tell us. John Chambers' makeup effects were based on technique he used during World War II to give any sort of soldiers who were unfortunately disfigured a more, I say normal, but I just got a more kind of like, to kind of make them feel better about their appearance. Apparently he took great care to study apes at LA Zoo, for example, and study the facial expressions. And so the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences gave him an honorary Oscar for makeup, which wasn't even a category in its own right until the early 80s, I think. And he held
apes at the zoo.
Apes at the Zoo, indeed.
Is that why all the characters
There's
are
an Oscar for that.
masturbating in every scene?
Obviously, I mean the category of makeup and special effects. He held regular training sessions for 20th Century Fox and mentored other makeup artists as well. And apparently there's a team of maybe 80 to 100 makeup artists working on this film, so much so that it slowed down other productions because literally he just managed to draft basically an army of makeup artists for the work on this film. I didn't realise as well that his other sort of claim to fame, obviously amongst many other things, was creating Spock's pointy ears for the the Star Trek TV series. Fun fact number three, other actors considered for the role of Dr. Zeus include Yul Brynner, Jose Ferrer, Alec Guinness, Laurence Olivier, Peter Ustinov, and Orson Welles. And some of the actors considered for the role of Taylor include Sean Connery, Stephen McQueen, Paul Newman, Rod Taylor, Rock Hudson, Burt Lancaster, as I mentioned earlier, and John Wayne. That would have been very interesting, I think. I don't think he would have got buck naked. Fun fact number four, the Statue of Liberty was in her original frame, which you see at the end of the film, and it was replaced in 1986 when the statue was renovated for its centennial. So the ending, the iconic image, which is kind of part model, part matte painting, is also interesting for that reason as well. Fun fact number five, and my last fun fact, as we said throughout the film, throughout the show, the Planet of the Apes franchise remains hugely popular and casts a big shadow within popular culture. In the 70s, fans Bill Blake and Paula Christ created their Cornelius and Zira costumes. They were so convincing that 20th Century Fox actually licensed them to appear at official events and cons, like Ape cons, things like that, during the 70s and 80s as well. So I think that's amazing. Obviously, cosplay is hugely popular today. And it's kind of it's a real treat to be able to kind of share artists and their talent at various cons. So I think this is kind of like one of the starting points really for it. There's sort of like Ape cons that are kind of really really popular for any sort of films and movies. And text is what I'm trying to say, sort of featuring apes and that sort of thing really. And so to have them sort of like create their own costumes just as fans of the book and fans of the series, fans of the film, and then for the studio to approach them and say like we can license you to appear officially at these sort of cons. I just think that's fantastic. So I think that's probably one of my favourite facts of Dispatch.
I just want to go to ApeCon.
Yeah, I'd like to go to ApeCon as well. That'd be amazing. I don't know, is it still going or what? I don't know.
I doubt it.
Probably not. But I imagine, I don't know if there was a new film out or something, you probably would see a lot of people, who did cosplay in that sort of like in the 70s. And they probably dress up again because I think that's amazing. ApeCon, let's look it up. Let's have a look. ApeCoin? No, I don't want ApeCoin. ApeCon. Let's see. No. Yeah, I don't think it is as a thing anymore.
Yeah,
so,
well,
a lot of programming websites come from ApeCon.
They are. There are going to be more Planet of the Apes films. They have sort of announced that it's a priority for them, the studio. So we will get more, and I think it's going to be in continuity with the most recent three, even though it won't be the same characters. So we'll see. So it may come back as a thing.
Yeah,
we'll
definitely.
I've always thought they're just going to come back and just remake this film, but in the same sort of setting as the new ones.
Well, eventually we'll get to the point where they will launch. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's telling a different story, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out one day, I'm sure, because it's obviously a viable product. It has to do decent box office because they're expensive to make now, all CG and stuff. But they do well enough and they've been good. You know, I won't. It won't be absolutely, it won't be untempered praise, but I'll be very positive about the new films, I think.
Can I just share an alleged fact about a film that I've seen?
Well, this sounds promising.
Alleged facts, yeah.
Allegedly, Jerry Goldsmith wore a gorilla mask while writing and
he
conducting.
did, yeah.
Oh wow,
Score.
really?
There's a picture of it. I'll find the photo. There's a
That's
picture of
fabulous.
him doing it.
What? While he was doing what?
While he was
Conducting.
conducting, writing and
That sounds
conducting
dodgy.
the score.
What was he doing, Dave?
Hang on, I'm having a look.
Going to the bathroom.
And throw shit on the wall, probably. But
Chris, are they free to call now?
If you type in Jerry Goldsmith ape mask into a Google image search, it's the first
dear.
image.
Yeah.
oh, so it is true then. Oh, that's
It's
good.
Yes, it's true. Yeah.
Ah, so
I'm literally
yes.
looking at a photo of it.
We'll have to share that on our social media feeds.
Yeah. So he couldn't hear shit, had no idea what he was conducting, but bollocks anyway, it'd be all right. Okay, as for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find me at Simultronics. You also find all the old episodes at simultronics.co.uk.
Find me at Films on Wax on Twitter.
And you can find us on Twitter at Expected to Talk. And you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you listen to us. And don't forget to like us, rate us, review us, and share us across social media. And if you want to email us, you can. expectedtalk@gmail.com.
Okay, we're underway. Brilliant. So, next week, continuity Charlton Heston, which means, Becca?
Do you expect us to talk or return with Beneath the Planet of the Apes?
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Who's off the